We'll be starting in just a minute. Well, a couple. One minute. There's just enough time to go grab a cookie and come back. Hi everybody, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name's Maria Spatelnik and I am here to help you make more quilts in less time with a lot less stress. I am attempting some new lighting today, so if you have any comments for me, please go ahead and give them. I've added extra lights in different places to try to see if I can kind of even it out a little bit, but me and tech and the space and everything, it's a tough one. I do like the better camera angle, so I'm hoping this is working for you. And so let's move on. So the tip for today is that sometimes you want to double check your work, but you don't necessarily want to sew a test block. Or if it's an overall design, you don't want to do the whole thing, because if you did the whole thing, you'd be done. And if there was a problem, you wouldn't spot it until it was too late. So I want to show you something that I'm working on. I've told you the story of the hexagons a couple of times, but this right here is one of the 3 designs that I'm working on using hexagon blocks, the 1-inchers. And so what I've done is I just used construction paper. And I punched out hexagons the same shape, same size as I'm going to finish with. And I tested my pattern with paper rather than testing it with fabric. So as long as I am consistent in my seams, in this particular case, this is English paper piece, so I'm pretty much guaranteed to be consistent in my seams. But even if I was doing something for my machine, if I test it with paper, I can see if I've done my calculations correctly for what all the final sizes are. Then of course you add in your 1/4 inch seam allowances and you're good to go. So in this particular design, there are actually some hexagons like right here where there's 3 different materials on one hexagon. And I'm not going to want to have to redo that a whole bunch of times. So my first thing was to confirm that this is going to work. And then what I'm going to do, which is going to sound weird, is I'm going to foundation piece a hexagon that I will then English paper piece into the quilt. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we're closer to that in my process. But you can see here that what I've done is I've tested it out. Right here, for example, when I drew the kelp that's behind here, it came down like this, and so there was a little piece of it here, plus what's up here, and then it disappeared. I've decided, now that I've seen it full size, I don't care for it like this. So what I'm doing is I'm going to extend the kelp down here, which is going to make this little triangle green, right? And I'm going to eliminate it down here. So the idea is that I can see how it's going to look in true size versus I was originally looking at graph paper that was 6 hexagons to an inch, and therefore it was just way too small to see those little details wouldn't work out in the full scale. Then what I did was I had a little bit bigger hexagon, 1/4 inch hexagons, and I then went back through and I colored them all again so that I could double check all my counts for how many red, green, blue, purple, orange, green, etc. that I needed. And all the specialty blocks are drawn out so that I'll know these are, 3-piece blocks and this is how they're going to work. So some of these, if this is the top of the hexagon here, there's only 1/3 that's one color. So just this top part, and then this part's the flat, and then we get down to the point at the bottom. Some are cut in half on the diagonal, point to point. So it's a little bit different. Now what I'll be able to do there is just seam 2 pieces together, and then when I'm putting it on the paper, I'll just line it up to the corners, and it'll just be a super easy way to get that seam in there, where other people wouldn't know that I hadn't done it with multiple tiny little pieces with the English paper piecing. So there are a couple of shortcuts that I'm building into this, but making your design check out of paper can sometimes save you a lot of time and effort, fabric, etc. Because this quilt is going to be 72 by 48, I would have to take each of the elements at least and test it with fabric. That would have taken me a long time, and if I didn't like it, then I'd have to pick out a whole lot of stuff. So just an idea, save yourself some time and energy, make some paper blocks or sections so you can confirm your work. So this week we are going to go back to the quilt we're designing together, which is this one you see here. So the center is these 2-inch finished wonky 4 patches, and then around it will be the 4-inch and 8 inches that you can see kind of hanging out on my wall over there. I am down to the last of the 2-inch, well, of course I'm cutting them at 2.5, 4 patches that I need to trim. So that's what I'm going to be working on while we're chatting today. I'm going to turn on the camera here. I know it's kind of in the way. I'm trying to find a good place to have the cameras so you can see without too many shadows, which is why I have extra lights set up in this particular space, which is kind of a tough space to be in. I'm hoping at some point, if this really takes off and people are enjoying it, that I'll be able to set up a more consistent, well-lit area here in my home where I can set up something a little bit more permanent, but also something that's more designed to do this, because I really do want to share this information with people. but I've got to make sure that it's going to be usable and I can still do my sewing around it, because this is my sewing table that we're sitting at. This is the back of my monitor that you can see, but right here in front of me is here, I'll flip the cameras here. You can't see, never mind. Underneath that mat there's a drop down section that my sewing machine sits in, and then that comes up to make the table flat, but that means that it wobbles quite a bit. So sometimes when I'm cutting, you're going to hear some extra thumping, and that's all it is that the table just kind of wobbles. But it was a good attempt to try to see if I would like one of the tables where the machine sits down in. I've tried the ones where it's an old Singer machine in a cabinet, but my knees never fit underneath the cabinet part where the machine goes, and it was very uncomfortable. So I was sitting there trying to get my knees off to the side, and the machine is set in position. I didn't like it at all. So this is an attempt to see if I like this style, and overall it does fine. But since I also need it to be flat, it kind of takes a beating, and it doesn't sit flat like I'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and switch. So if you're welcome to watch as I cut. So at this point, for those of you, if this is your first time, I always start with a tip, which I did, and then we're working on a project together, which is these wonky 4 patches. So I'm taking 4 patches that I sewed out of 2-inch blocks, raw, so they finished at 3.5. As you can see right there, well, it's a little bit shy. So why is it shy? This is one of the, I mentioned this before, when I when I picked up some squares off of the free table at my guild, I put them in a box, and I have several, not box, a drawer unit. The 3 drawer, I apologize, it's been a very long week already. Let me explain this a little bit better. In the past, I've shown some 3-drawer plastic units that I put my processed material in. My squares, strip blocks, things like strip sets, things like that. So I have the blocks that I have cut, everywhere from 1 inch to 12.5 inches. But since I picked up some off of a free table, some of the blocks aren't precisely the correct size. So I have drawers that are labeled, for example, 2.5-inch blocks cut by someone else. This was my 2-inch blocks cut by someone else. I have hexagons, I have miscellaneous shapes like hearts that someone had cut out, where I don't know how correctly they're cut. For this particular project, it doesn't matter. Because I'm going to be cutting it wonky, if it's off a little bit, I just turn my ruler until my 2.5 inches fits, and we're good to go. So in this particular block that you're looking at here, this is not exactly precise. So I can line this up like so, and you can see it's a little bit shy here, and it's a little bit shy here. Now this could have been a sewing distraction, or it just might not have been perfectly cut to start with. But this is obviously because the blocks were off a little bit. Like I said though, I don't care as long as my 2.5, my 2.5, and my 2.5 are all on the fabric. I can turn this as much as I want and then go ahead and cut it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these 2. And then spin this. So some of you recognize these sounds that you were listening to while you were waiting for me to start. I'm going to go ahead and cut these other 2. And there's my new wonky 4 patch. There we go. Okay, now I made a mistake earlier. I was cutting this one, and I had done 2 sides, and when I spun it around, I noticed I had cut it, and it had slid just before I took the first 2 cuts. And you can see this little corner is cut off. In this quilt, it doesn't matter. Because we're going to be 1/4 of an inch off, actually let me do it this way so it's a little bit easier to see. It's actually going to be like so, because here's my seam allowance, right? I still have plenty of meat in this seam allowance, so I don't really have to worry about it. So if you found that you did this and it's off just a tiny bit in the corners, you're fine. Nothing to worry about. Okay, so once this is done, then I'll be going to the design wall. It probably won't be tonight. And I will go ahead and get them up there. And so when I come back and meet you here another time, see, here's my 2.5 intersection. I'm fully on. We'll be able to go ahead and you'll see what the center of the quilt looks like. So anyway, this has been a crazy week. I have a U-Haul near me that I've probably rented trucks, I don't know, at least 20 or 30 times. And so I set it up. I call them directly. And I'm just going to put it this way so you can keep looking around my sewing room here if you want to. I called them directly, and I told them I was going to need to pick the truck up at 6 a.m. Now, they don't open until 7. But they have this program where they will set up a truck for you, and you can sign in online, and then they will put your key in a drop box that they have, and they give you a code. You type in the code, you get the key, you can check out, and out you go at 2 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't matter what time. So I went ahead and I set this all up with the gal. I got there 6 a.m. Monday morning. I was not a fan of being there at 6 o'clock Monday morning, but that's what I needed to do because I needed to go to a town called Winchester, which is about an hour and a half from here because I was meeting a hauling company to empty out some storage units. So I get there at 6 o'clock. I go through, I enter all my information, etc., etc., etc. And I get a note. This is for hand delivery. You can pick up at 7 a.m. What? It says 6 right on my order form. So I call the office there. Not the local one. I call U-Haul directly. And they said, oh, well, they didn't set it up properly. There is no truck for you here. Okay. Now what do? I need to meet someone at 8 o'clock. I can't get the truck until after 7, and it's an hour and a half away. Okay. They found me the kind of truck I wanted that I could pick up at a different location, but it was actually 20 minutes the other direction. Well, by the time we're going through all of this and they found me this information, it's 6:30. So I'm like, well, I can't go 20 minutes and 20 minutes. I might as well wait here and pick up the truck at 7 o'clock. Fine. So I'm standing around outside, and there's a gal there who's checking in trucks. I said, can you help me? She said, no, you have to wait for the manager. So I'm standing in the cold, waiting for the manager to come. So he comes, he lets me in. I tell him my story. He asks me who I did the reservation with. I don't know. I made like 40 calls that day. And they don't actually say, hi, this is Maria at U-Haul, whatever. So I never got a name. So I knew I had spoken to a gal named Brittany that day. I said, I don't know. I spoke to a lot of people that day. It might have been Brittany, but I don't know. He goes, there's no Brittany here. Fine. So I went ahead. I got checked out at 7:04. So I get in my truck, and I head out to Winchester. And the whole day went fine. It took longer than I'd like, but some days just do. And the hauling company was there, and we went to the first location. We got that done. I took the guys to lunch at like 2:30. Then we went to the second location. We got done. It's 6 o'clock. I call the local store again, and I say, look, my original plan had been to return this today while you were still open, but I'm not going to be able to do that. Please set it up so that I can drop it off later today. And she said, fine. And so she said, you are scheduled to deliver it by midnight. And I said, I know. I had really thought it would be at 6 a.m., but it says midnight. I will have it there by midnight. And she said, oh, I will fix it. It will say 7:04 because that's the time you picked it up, and it's a 24-hour rental. I said, great. So I get home. I have some dinner. It's 8:30. I start unloading the truck. And I start doing it by myself. My son comes home. He was going to help, but he'd hurt his hand. He still came out and helped anyway. He was a real trooper. I had him take me to the U-Haul. I drove the truck, but he was with me because I was super duper tired. And so we go through the whole process. We get checked out. He's looking over my shoulder. Now, my son's 26, so it's not a big deal. And he is often up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So, excuse me. So I'm on there. We both agree, yep, it says I'm done. Here's my confirmation, etc., etc. Perfect. Come home. The next morning, we get a receipt that says it was 2 days because I didn't bring it in until 7:14 because that's the time that they checked it in. It was already sitting there from 11:05, which is when I drove it in and finished got the confirmation that it was all there and everything else. So not only was it not ready for me to pick up properly, they didn't even check to see what time I brought it in before they billed me for a second day. So that's how my week started. So as I'm sure you can imagine, it's been a crazy week. But the rest of the week has gone fine. Today, and the reason that you're seeing me with my hair looking reasonable and my makeup on and everything and an actual necklace is today I was out doing networking for my organizing company. So I promised you that, if I was dressed up, you'd get to see it, because most of the time I'm going to be looking like the schlub that I am when I get home and showered from my job. What a lot of people don't know is that dirt and dust will stick to makeup. So if I were to wear makeup on the job site, I would actually be inviting eye infections and things like that. So there's never any makeup. There's no hairspray in. It's always back in a ponytail when I'm working. So hair up, plain face is how I am most of the time. So when I get home from work, I will shower. I let my hair stay down at that point, which then it goes curly. But I don't bother putting on makeup because I'm just going to be going to bed shortly. So that's why that's the way you see me normally. But today I hope you appreciate it because now I'm all dolled up just for you. Scott asked me earlier if I was going to come up and wash my face and take off all my makeup and get changed into comfortable clothes and everything. And I said, not this time. Every once in a while I have to shock them with some makeup. So there you are. Anyway, so it's like I said, it's been a little bit crazy. Today was networking, so of course I've done my hair and my makeup, and it's been raining here in DC all day, in the DC area. I was out in Loudoun, and so I was at 2 different senior communities. I was at, I forget the name of the community. It's the first time I've been there. It's in Leesburg, and it was a very nice place. Apparently it's less than 2 years old. So they were scheduled to build and started building pre-COVID, and then all of a sudden they got hit with that. So it's been an interesting time for them. And then the second one was Tribute One Loudoun, and I've been there several times. But it was nice to go, and I got to see some people I haven't seen for a while because this is the first time I've been out networking face-to-face pretty much since COVID. So it was nice to get out and see people I hadn't seen for a long time. A couple of my friends from networking and things I had been hoping would be there, and they weren't, so that was kind of disappointing. But overall, it was a good time. It's also nice because they provide food. So this morning there was a continental breakfast, and then on the the second one, it was lunchtime. So there was a chef salad and chicken soup and dessert. And I actually indulged in all of it. So there you go. So no desserts or snacks or anything for me at home today because I had coconut cake as a lunch dessert, which is kind of sinful because you don't get to have dessert at lunch very often. And so it was a lot of fun. But so today was a better day. But tomorrow morning I get to get up and be out the door early because I am meeting the guys, the hauling guys, at a different job in Great Falls at 8 a.m. So I will be up and out early for that. I'll have breakfast here though. And then I have another client at the end of the day in Alexandria. So I don't know if at that point I'm going to be coming home in between or not. Okay, now see, here's another one. If you look here, my point's off just a little bit here and just a teeny weeny little bit here. But again, it's not enough that I'm worried about it. So for example, on, it wasn't this one. Which one was it? Oh, here, it is this one. I wanted to make sure to get this little bee in here because I thought he was cute. But I had to do it in such a way that I was sure I had more than enough seam allowance. Here, let me turn it like this so you can see it a little bit better. Because my seam allowance is here and here. So his little bee butt is just barely inside. But in order to make that work, you can see here on this blue that this point's just a little bit cut off, and so is this one. But again, I don't have to worry about it because with my seam allowance, here we go, I have plenty of material around both of those points. Okay? Now, if this is your first time seeing this particular quilt, what you have to understand is that the goal of this is to use up 4 patches you already have. So what we did at the beginning was, well, at the very beginning, I offered several different designs that we would create together, different categories of designs that we could create together. And this one was the most popular, with the idea that it was going to use orphaned 4 patches. And then we designed the quilt, and this is the final design. So what I'm hoping is every year to do the same thing, to have several categories that you can choose from. Once we've chosen the categories, then we'll come up with some ideas. You guys will pick which idea you like the best, and then we're going to sew them together, which is why you're watching me cut today. For the other quilts that I've done, like this red and white one that you see here, this is a class, but this isn't something that you would have watched me sew because I would have been doing it for, a large amount of time if I only did it with you. And so the stuff that I have a planned deadline for, those I do on my own, and I'm trying to get better at videotaping them. And when there's a little bit more slack in my schedule, then I will go ahead and get the editing done, which is still behind. And I'm going to get there, I promise, sooner or later. I will have these things edited down. But for right now, you can go to the live streams and you can just get the first little bit, which is going to be the tip. Other tips that come up later in the conversation, I may redo as the beginning of a different section so that it comes back up. Because if you don't watch the whole thing, I don't want you to miss it. But anyway, so for today, I'm going to finish cutting these. Probably not today. It's almost 7:30. I'll probably get about 2/3 of the ones that I have left done, and I am cutting some extras. I don't have more than 2 of any given non-whitish material. So, for example, I do not have more than 2 of this strawberry material to go into the design because I need 144 2-inch finished blocks. There are some that I have 2 versions of. The background color is something white or white-ish. So if you look up here on the wall, so this one's a bad example because these are 2 shades of green. But I have some taupey colors up at the top here. You can see this one. I think you can see what I'm putting a shadow on. It has almost a grocery bag brown. That's the darkest that they can be in terms of my lights. And so I do want a variety of light and dark, and some of these have 4 different materials, most of them have 2. And so the idea is that the only wrong way to cut these blocks is as a perfect 4-patch. So if you look here, hang on, let me get my glasses out of the way. If I were to say, okay, this is a 4-patch that I want to finish at 2.5, so that'd be 1 1/4, and so I'd go 1 1/4. If I were to cut it just like this, I would have, hold on, just like that, I would have a perfectly normal 4-patch. And if you had a couple in there, it wouldn't matter. But we want it to be wonky. We want it to be obvious that that was not the goal. If I took this and I was cutting everything where it was this wonky, okay, as you can tell, that's not very much at all. You know, if you look at this line here, right, it's only off a teeny bit. It looks like I made a mistake, not that it was intentional. So since this is intentional, we are taking things extreme. Now, this doesn't exactly fit, but it's really close. If I turned it this way, you can see that it's almost a 1/4 square triangle. Now, I could take orphaned 1/4 square triangles and do this same technique, because instead of going this way, I just turn it the other way. This is too much like, again, I made a mistake because it's only off a little tiny bit. So we want to make it obvious. We made this as a decision. This isn't an oops, we didn't catch. Okay? So. Very obvious that this was not an accident. So here we go. Now, hold on, let me check real quick here. I doubt there's anything in the comments. It looks like most of you who watch at another time. I've got a couple of people on now. However, if you want to leave me a message in the chat, I will respond. One of 2 ways. If you leave me a question that is kind of global interest, then I'm more than happy to answer it globally, because that means someone else might have the same kind of question. So for example, if your question was, what size blocks did I sew together to get the 4 patches that I need to do this, that would be a more global question. If your question was, I'm trying to do this anniversary quilt, and this person likes this color and this person likes that color, and I want to send you I'm sending you an email with the color samples and and which of these 2 peaches do you think? That's a very specific question, and so that I would probably just answer in email. So, or back in the chat if you sent it to me on chat. You can email me. It's over here on the side, mail@stashblasterquilts.com. Even though the website isn't working, the emails are. So please feel free to email me there. And a lot of times the things I talk about here are because of emails that I've gotten. As an example, the hexagon quilt. I mentioned that there was a gal in the same class where I learned how to do flat back English paper piecing versus the old-fashioned way that I'd always done it before. That she was getting frustrated. She was feeling a lot of stress. And the goal of having a hobby like this is to reduce our stress. And so I said, well, I wasn't sure that this was the kind of activity for her. If it is, great. If I misread it. However, she sent me an email with the attachment of the finished sample block. It's basically what Tina calls a mug mat. So it's about a foot long and maybe 6 inches wide in this particular one. It's a little bit bigger than a mug mat. But the idea was that she actually got hers done. She put it on the background material, she bound it and everything, and then sent me a picture of it. So even if she decides that English paper piecing isn't the thing for her, I was thrilled that she sent me the picture, and I'm just sharing it with you because A, I would love it if you sent me stuff like that. But B, you got part of the story, I want to make sure you get the end of it. So I thought that was wonderful. And I sent her back a congratulations note that she got it finished. But that was something that I got through email. And so you're welcome to email me. You're welcome to do something in the chat. If you enjoy what I'm doing here, even if it's just the tip at the beginning, if you could like, subscribe, I would appreciate that. If you hit the bell, it'll let you know the next time I'm on. Now, the live stream is the first and third Wednesday of every month. There's been one exception so far. I believe there will be one this year. I am going to be teaching at a conference, and I'm not sure if I'll have the ability to do Wi-Fi from there. It's in Nebraska, and given the time zone, I think I'm teaching at the time I would be doing the live stream here. If that's the case, I will be sure that you know at least the couple of sessions before that I won't be on. But that's the only one I can think of this year that's that situation. I could be wrong. There may be another one later. But as a general rule, first and third Wednesdays of the month, live streaming. When that gap opens in my schedule that I was telling you about, I will start doing some edits, in which case then I'll be posting some videos. They'll be short. Those you will also get notified of if you've hit the bell. So that's what's going on with that. Was there something else about the live stream that I'm missing? I don't know. I'm still tired from Monday. Oh, I didn't tell you. There was probably 5,000 pounds in that truck. So that was a lot to load and to unload in the dark at my house. So, because I had to return the truck. I couldn't just leave it till the next day. So that was a big thing. No, I think that was it. Okay. Anyway, back to cutting. So I do want to go ahead and get these cut. If not today, then over the next couple of days. Again, it's a crazy time for us here at the company. So this is StashBlaster Quilts. My regular company is called Conquer the Clutter. I am a professional organizer by trade. And so the client I'm going to tomorrow morning so early, she just sold her house in Great Falls and is moving further south in Maryland, in Virginia, near Richmond, which is the capital, of course, to be near her, near one of her daughters, the daughter's husband and their new baby. So we're trying to get her house ready. So she's in the downsizing process right now. So we're going through a ton of stuff and deciding to get rid of a lot of things and donate a bunch of stuff, etc. So that'll be a good day. And then I have, because I spent all day Monday in the truck and in storage units, I normally try to reserve my Mondays to get, all my office work cut up on. But I wasn't able to do that, so I'm hoping to have about half of the day on Friday available to do that. Because, taxes and invoices and things like that. Can't wait. But anyway, so at least the end part of my week should be a lot calmer. And we'll see where it goes from there. But if you are doing this project with me, if you have any questions or problems, please feel free to reach out. Email and the chat and stuff are things that I am staying up on. So it's not going to get, pushed to the side. The website is still one of those things where Scott's working on it, but it keeps crashing, and the company who runs the servers for the website keeps saying it's not their fault. And then whenever it crashes, they isolate us from it, and then we have to go through a whole big rigmarole to get back into it to try to... It's a nightmare. But we've put in a lot of work on the thing, we don't want to just, give it up and rebuild on another service or something like that if we can avoid it. So we're working on it, but it's not something that's going to be a quick... just restore something old or something, because that's not going to cut it. Technology and I've said this for years, we have a hate-hate relationship. And so since we both hate each other, we both make each other miserable. I'm actually pretty pleased with how the live streams are going now, because at first I had trouble every single time. If you ever think about doing one of these, expect that your the first several are going to be kind of rocky. A couple of sessions ago, I was waiting because I start early, and it shows the clock in the bottom corner so you can see how long it is before I'm going to be back. And it was like 3 minutes before we were supposed to start, and all of a sudden YouTube shut it down. No reason, they just dropped me from the site. And so I had to go and get everything signed back in and turn cameras on and off and da-da-da-da-da. And I got back on with about a half a minute to spare, so I felt pretty good about that. So I'm getting better and better at figuring this stuff out. But I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't done anything strange. Just all of a sudden it went, hiccup! And it was gone. So, this has been a learning curve for me the whole way around, but I'm actually getting a little more comfortable with it, so that's good. Oh, now I just made another mistake. So I'm going to show you. This is one thing that I do when we do this together. Whenever anything happens, you get to see my mistakes and how I'm going to fix them. So as I was cutting, you can see there's a little bit of fabric here. I slipped and my ruler shifted mid-cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reassess here where my 2.5 inch mark is. So coming down from here, can you see right there? That's my 2.5. So I'm going to just shift the whole thing and make sure that 2.5 is still on the fabric, which it is, see? So the 2.5 is here, and here's the edge of my fabric. So it's not a lot of space, but I do have some. And I can see here that I've got fabric on this side, and I can see here that I have fabric on this side. It's slightly off down here. I'm just shy of 2.5. So I'm going to slide this up. And now I'm fully on. So here, I check here again. I check up here. Yep, I'm still on. And this is right on the edge of the fabric, so I'm good. So now I'm going to cut these again. See, you heard that fabric cut the whole way. So even though some of it's just these little threads, we're still good. Okay. I should rotate this, but you're in a pretty good spot here, so I'm going to go ahead and just put it on. Just flip it. I don't always bring out my rotary mat anyway. Okay, again, 2.5. Now see here, I was almost going to cut, and I have an extra 1/8 here. So I caught it in time, so I'm just going to move this down. Okay. Now see, here was another one of the bumblebees. Oops. Another one of the bumblebees. The problem is that sometimes you're not going to have your seam allowance. It's not worth trying to aim to keep something when my 1/4 inch is pretty much here, and he's going to go away anyway. So I didn't even try to get him this time. This time I wanted to make sure I got these really big plump strawberries. Yes, I know this one's going to be chopped off, but I have a couple of really nice ones right there and there. Now here, when I sewed these together, I wanted to make sure that I had the butterfly and the flower. I already didn't have a lot of either one, okay? But I said, you know what, having those little extra pops of color will be nice. Not necessary, but nice. But when I cut this, if I were to cut like this, I'd get the flower, but I would lose almost half of this butterfly. Do you see that? So one of the things that I want to pay attention to is how do I get the pieces in here that I want the most with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on both sides. Now I can rotate this some and still have everything. So I could put it like this, okay, because I have my 1/4 of an inch here that I need, and then there's like a 1/16, but it's still going to be enough. Or I could take this and move my 2.5 all the way off to the side. Okay, this is not quite all the way, but it's close. I could put it all the way over, and then slide down a little bit, so I'm still a 1/4 of an inch and a 1/16 away. So this would still be wonky because this isn't going to come out as your normal 4 patch, but my 2.5 is right here. So I'm going to lose part of this flower because I'm actually going to wind up with my cut here. I mean, not my cut, my seam allowance would leave me just this 1/16 of an inch of flower that's showing right there. Well, that's not what I want. So what I'm going to need to do is to go ahead and do the rotation, making sure as best as I can, and I may not be able to. That's something to keep in mind too. You don't always get what you want. But if I line this like this, okay, here is exactly my 1/4 of an inch right at the bottom of this flower. There's my 1/4 of an inch right to the edge of the butterfly. My 2.5 here is just off the fabric. My point here is just off the fabric. And then the other one here's okay, and this is going to be close, whether it's on or off. But because I know I have 90% of that seam allowance, I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it just like this. So see here, there's that little tiny point I cut off, but that's okay. 2.5, 2.5. Okay, so this point's perfect. This point's perfect, but this one got chopped and this one got chopped. Way less than by a 1/4 of an inch. We're still got plenty of meat on there for the seam allowance, so we're good to go. So we're going to keep that. So anyway, oh, it's 1/4 of. Okay, we're doing good. By the way, if this is your first time, it is my goal to start on time and end on time. End time is 8 o'clock. If in the middle of sewing this quilt or something, we were at a point where it would be another 5 minutes to complete something, then I might go over. But my goal is to respect your time. I don't want you thinking, when is this girl going to be quiet and get us to where we need to be? So, and that would be the polite way to put it. So let's stick with that way. So just so you know, I do plan on ending at 8 o'clock. So it's from 7 to 8, and I try to respect that time, so we're good. But I'm pretty pleased. You know, I've gotten quite a few 4 patches sewn. I'm cut, right? There's a nice stack. It's about 1/3 of the total that I had set aside for today. Oh, I mentioned I'm going to cut some extras. I need 144 blocks for the middle part of this quilt. But I actually made 160. Actually, that's not true. I had 100 and 128 in my stash. So I made the difference between 160 and 128, which would be 60, 128, 32. I made an extra. Yes, I made 32. I only need 144, so I have 16 extras. Why am I doing that? Why am I going to destroy 4 patches that could be made into perfectly fine 4 patches by cutting them wonky? Well, I can always trim them down to a perfectly square 4 patch at a smaller size. That's not a problem. But when I'm working on my design wall here, I want the ability to have some substitutions. So for example, this one here, I don't know that I like. Okay? Because I think that by having the 2 greens and this green being so dark, that it may make things look muddy when I'm doing my middle. So I want the ability to make substitutions. Now, I could leave the 4 patches just like they are and then put them on the wall and put the other 4 patches over them so I would only see the wonky middle. And then if I didn't like it, I could take it down and not cut it. I'm so far ahead on 4 patches. I still have 2 drawers, and these are the deeper drawers I showed you before, of 4 patches left after I pulled these ones out. They're ones with either, instead of the white or whitish colors, there's blacks, or they're all mid-tone florals, so there's not a strong contrast. So in that particular case, those don't really work well in this design, so I'm not using those. So I am going to go ahead and cut mine. But you certainly don't have to. You can audition them. You can put up the ones that you have when you hit 144. And if you don't like something, you pull it out and then you cut the one that you think will work so that you only have a couple of extras. That's fine. Or you say, you know what, this was a flyer and it was going to be a charity quilt anyway. I don't care if it's not perfect. I've learned something or I've tried it. And I also got to use up all those old orphan blocks that I had. So we're good regardless. Sometimes we're good is a fine answer. So I'm cutting the extras just so I have that ability to play. Another thing that you don't know, unless you've been watching, and watching all the way through, is that I'm going to be making 2 wonky 4 patches. So having a few extras pre-cut for the next project that I'm going to be doing is fine. It certainly doesn't hurt anything. So in my particular case, as far as that's concerned, if I don't use them now, I'll use them next time. The next one I'm going to pay more attention to in terms of how many blocks I have and how many I need, so that I won't have as many extras. Because the goal is to get rid of the stash. So that's what this is. If you haven't been watching all the way along, the reason I have so many 4 patches to do this game with is that if I get stressed or I can't sleep, there are some blocks like 4 patches, half square triangles, flying geese, that I will just come into my sewing room, go to the drawers that are behind you where you are, where I have my pre-cut blocks, and I will just say, I feel like doing half square triangles today. And I'll just pull out some blocks and I'll sew half square triangles, or 4 patches, or whatever. So I just do that because I want something I don't have to think about what I'm doing. Excuse me. I don't want to have to think about what I'm doing, but I still want to sew because I want that repetitive, calming activity of just pushing stuff through my machine. So it might be that in the middle of the night, one night, if I can't sleep either because of physical pain or mental gyrations going on, when your brain doesn't shut off, if something like that's going on, then I'll come in here and I'll sew and I'll sew and I'll sew and I'll sew. And everything falls off my table. It goes underneath my monitor. And it goes off the edge of the table and down into a box. And then at some point, I'll put a leader ender through, which might just be another 4-patch. Doesn't matter. If that's all I've been doing, I'll just leave the last one that's in there and snip the thread. Gravity will pull them all down and right into the box. And then I'll take the box downstairs and I will press down there in front of the TV. And then I usually pin the pairs together just so that they stay together. So when I come up, because that's, again, something I just do in front of the TV. It's quick, it's easy, and everything is all lined up and ready to go. And then when I come upstairs to bed, I'll drop them off here on my table. And then the next time I want to sit and just sew, or just the next time I come in here, I might want to go ahead and finish the 4 patches because I want to make room on deck here for something else. Then I will go ahead and sew those 4 patches. Sometimes they go right into... Actually, I am done right now. I have a shoebox that's full of leader enders that I've pinned so that they're always ready to go and into my machine. I might just take that whole stack of 2 patches that I've made and chuck them in that leader ender box. And then that way they're ready to go at any time. And if I just want to sew, I can pull that box out and run a whole bunch of that out. Or I can just do them a couple at a time. And then when they're done, they go into the 4-patch bin over here. And then when I want to do something with them, either because I'm just in the mood to do something with 4 patches, or I've come up with a design to use them, like this, then I will go ahead and just pull that drawer out and sort them into whatever categories I want for that quilt and go ahead and make it. So I do the same thing with half square triangles. This entire red quilt you see here, red and white quilt, was made out of my stash of half square triangles. So you can see I had a few. Okay, because these are just the red, white-ish. So some of them are creams, some of them are darker. But for the most part, it's the lighter shades. And one of the reasons for that is that if I am just sewing, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about matching things up color-wise. There are sometimes I'll take like a light purple and a dark purple and put them together into a half square triangle or a 4-patch. But for the most part, I'm just going to go ahead and grab white squares and red or green or blue or purple or whatever comes out of the bin in whatever order it comes and run it through my machine. One thing with 4 patches, I don't know if I've ever talked about this on here. Sometimes I don't want to just take squares, like the 2-inch squares, out of my bin and sew 2 of them together and then find another pair and sew 2 of them together. One thing that you can do, and I don't have a 4-patch handy, I mean a single block, so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to fold it so it looks like one block of material. Okay, so we're going to pretend that this is just a regular square. Okay, if you take this, you can sew down both sides. Okay, and then when you cut it down the middle, you will have 2 squares that are bisected by color when they're pressed. Okay? Then what you can do is, so it would be half yellow and half blue. So it's going to look more like this. Okay? Now, at that point, you've already sewn the one seam. You've done it on both sides, so they're still together, which is nice. Then what you can do is you can cut it, fold it, and you'll be folding it this way. You'd rotate it, and then you'll have your 4 patches. So sometimes I will just sew down both sides of a bigger block and just do a 4-patch that way, because I have a cutter and everything downstairs right next to my iron as well. So if you don't want to be trying to mix and match to make sure, especially if you don't have good lighting, you can use a larger square and do that. And one of the reasons I'm telling you this is when one of my rules for my cut stuff is if I can't close the drawer anymore, I have to make something out of that size material. So I do squares from 1 inch to 12.5 raw, and then I do strips from 1 to 6.5. Now, sometimes I'll take the 6.5s and just string them together and then put them together and make a backing for a quilt or something like that, because that's kind of an interesting, fun design. You can also vary the sizes. So if you like cutting bigger things, maybe you do 10-inch strips and 8-inch strips or something, you could have one row of 10s and then a row of 8s and then another 10 and then a 4 and then whatever, and then you sew them so that they're all lined up at the top, and then when you've got it on the bottom of your quilt and it's all done, you just whack off what's left and then you cut things out of those. So you never waste that material, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it could be fun to do for a back, and as long as the strip is all the same size, and you can put whatever size strips together that you have. But my goal is to go ahead and not have my drawers get to a point where I can't fit any more in them, because I'm always processing fabric. Then I would have to have more drawers. And while I do have multiple drawers of some sizes that I use a lot, like 2.5 strips, then I still have a limit on how many drawers I'll allow myself to have. And when it gets full, it's time to do charity sewing, because that's what I usually do with stuff that I've pre-cut, unless I'm pulling for a specific design. So just as a thought, when you're looking at what you have, there's lots of ways to do things. So if my, let's say, 8-inch block section gets really big, I can do that fast 4-patch, with them on the two sides, and then cut, press, twist, sew, done. Cut, and then press, and the 4 patches are done. So just a thought. Sometimes if you're just in I gotta sew mode, and I have a lot of a larger size than what I would want 4 patches or half square triangles or whatever to be, there are other ways to make them that would end result be smaller units, but not a whole lot of tracking effort or anything like that. Because if I do down the two sides of the square, they're already together, they're already there, I know where they are, and it's quicker and easier. So just that thought. Anyway, it's only a couple of minutes to go, so thank you for coming. If you've enjoyed today, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. There's a whole bunch of past lives. So I sound like Shirley MacLaine. There's a whole lot of past live streams that I have done, so you're welcome to go to the YouTube site and find them there. I talk about a whole bunch of stuff. And again, please feel free to email me at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com or leave me a comment and I will respond. Have a wonderful rest of the week. I hope that you have a good weekend in beautiful weather. And I will see you here in 2 weeks. Have a good time. And I'm going to go sew. Come join me.